And we are live. My name is JP Berg, and this is Dumb the Wiser, the show where we try to make sense of a very mad world. Today, we're joined by Matthew Pauly. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great, Jean-Paul. I'm glad to be here. How are you?
I'm really good, man. It's good to have you back. I really enjoyed the last conversation we had. The one criticism I have of the conversation is we were so fixated on educating people relative to C9 that we didn't get to chat and just see, like, what are your general interpretations of what's occurring geopolitically, domestically. So I thought it would be interesting to do it again and just keep it loose and informal and just kind of theorize or hypothesize about what we potentially see on the horizon. So
Yes.
with that said, what's some of the things that are concerning you presently?
Well, one of the things that's occurred is that we're seeing the dots connecting on the world stage with the Canadian stage quite clearly with this the Strait of Hormuz closure and the impact that's having on the world, not just in terms of oil and crude oil availability, but fertilizer, the food, that generates the food for 4 billion people in the world by that Haber-Bosch process of cracking natural gas into its constituent parts, including the ammonia in the urea fertilizer. So nitrogenous fertilizer. So the impact that's having on the world, it's like a delayed, it's like a grenade, a flashbang grenade. And there's the noise that comes, after the explosion, the further you are away. Well, in this case, it's like a 60-day echo. And so what's happened is that the beginning of this war, on March 28th, the last ships fueled up with crude oil and left. And now we're seeing in like right now, the UK, as of a week or two ago, got its last shipment of JP1 jet fuel, and EU is scheduled to run out of jet fuel within 2 or 3 weeks. So the impact this is going to have on Canada and the rest of the world is, it's already happening in Australia, right, where they're couple hundred petrol stations are closed. They don't have any fuel.
Same with parts of Asia. I hear
Oh,
Vietnam
yes.
has had one of the first energy lockdowns where it's non-essential travel. So basically, don't go to work, just stay home. We're out of energy. Just to interject quickly, one of the more intriguing things about this now, the Strait of Hormuz, that's the main catalyst that's affecting this and creating this. But what's coinciding is randomly all around the world, all of these oil refineries are seemingly being sabotaged, or it's acts of terrorism or accidents. But it seems like they're too numerous to be entirely coincidental.
Absolutely. And that's another dot that's connecting here. It's not just the overt, declarations of we're going to attack you if you do this kind of thing that's going on. We're seeing, as you say, like in the last 10 days or so, there's been at least about approximately 10 major sabotages of primarily oil refineries. But also in one case, I think it was in Sri Lanka, they had 10 ships, tankers that all burned up. And you're seeing the latest is in Russia, right? That they've hit the number 4 refinery in Russia, and that's primarily for export. So the effects are just huge, and so this is not just the war in Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. It's, as you say, it's all this sabotage that's occurring to all these places across in all the countries, from even Texas in the United States. I mean, it's happening all around, and so this is no accident. And the Dr. Chris Martenson, I've been following his stuff, and I have a giant thread on this whole topic, and he's pointed out that that if you were the World Economic Forum saying that you wanted to have you own nothing and be happy by 2030, you would expect exactly this kind of thing, where the food would be causing shortages, which would be causing famine in the poorer parts of the world. And then, of course, people in the middle class in first world countries like Canada wouldn't be able to take, because they're already right on the edge. And we have the highest per capita, the rate of the credit card or overall personal debt per GDP of all the G7 countries. And so they're right on the edge. So they can't afford those extra food prices. So they're going to have to be reaching out, and they'll be getting universal basic income when that will be offered as this, problem reaction solution.
Yeah, and it's just as sensational as it sounds, and you lose a lot of people when you start talking about this, but there's cause and effect, and there's natural conclusions one must arrive at. Now, I'll qualify this as conjecture, but seemingly there's externalities, large, powerful groups that are engineering an energy crisis and a famine. So
Correct.
again, and that's what I see. It's just, is it problem reaction solution? So the problem, we have an energy crisis and a famine. The reaction is mass panic and chaos, and the solution is the Great Reset. It's the New World Order, however you want to phrase it. But that's seemingly where we're at. We're in the latter stages.
Correct, and it's actually not just conjecture; it's provably correct. That if you listen to excellent analysts on this, for example, Dr. Chris Martenson and many others, that it's a matter of molecules, and you can't print molecules like you can print money. And we right now with the Strait of Hormuz, they're saying, oh, it's only affecting 20% of the world's oil or something. Yeah, but it's 30% of the world's fertilizer, and 4 billion people require that fertilizer to eat. So it's baked in at this point that, and there was a recent thing that was not level one evidence. It was actually based on polling or interviewing and getting farmers to give their input. 70% of U.S. farmers were saying that they were unlikely to be buying fertilizer for their crops this year. They can't do it. So it's not just the third world. It's actually going to be first world countries where farmers can't afford to plant their crops, even because some of them, we're the organized ones that buy a year in advance, so they already have their fertilizer. They can sell that fertilizer now and be a huge margin because it's gone up significantly, and be guaranteed a profit. Whereas if they plant and use that fertilizer, the cost of diesel fuel is going to be spiking so high. It's already gone up, but it's going to go much higher, that they know by the time harvest comes, they will have burned through so much expense on diesel that they're not going to make a profit. So some of them are just literally not planting. So it's beyond conjecture at this point. If you look at the physical volume of oil that has now been halted, you can't get that back. And the urea fertilizer, it's too late. The spring plantings already happened in some places, and like in Thailand, and they didn't have enough fertilizer. And in here, like I say, even in North America, there's not enough, fertilizer. It's too expensive for the farmers, all the farmers, to have it. So it's real.
I should clarify too. No, it's definitely occurring. What I was meaning, it's conjecture for me to then assume there's a clandestine group that's coordinating it. That's kind of like to prove motive or to prove who specifically. It's conjecture on my behalf. I was just qualifying it, but I'm with you, man. There's no denying that this is occurring, and there's cause and effect to consider. So there's natural repercussions of what we're seeing, and what I see, and again, this is my own personal opinion, but I think we're going to have the whole lockdown thing again. It's going to be, we have an energy crisis, so you can't waste energy for inconsequential travel. You know what I mean? If you have an important enough job, just like during the pandemic, which was seemingly a run through or a practice run, I think, for future tyranny. But that's what I see coming, man. And I don't see how there's any avoiding it at this time, because these powerful forces are in motion. So there's no stopping it.
Yes, absolutely. And you're correct. We can't know who is doing it, but the fact that it's beyond coincidence when you have literally 10 in a week. And Michael Yon, of course, the brilliant war correspondent and former Green Beret, and for 25 years or 20 years at least, he's been traveling and analyzing routes, resources, and ideologies. And he's living in Japan and traveling all around the world, visiting all the straits and all the routes for trade. And he actually called the BASF thing leaving Germany, that's the largest petrochemical place in for all the chemicals they need, including fertilizer in Europe. He called that ahead of time. He called the Nord Stream pipeline being sabotaged literally a month or two before it happened, because he could see, studying, that was the best way of achieving what they wanted to achieve by causing Europe to be deindustrialized. And in fact, that's what happened. And he's saying, there's no question that you can actually analyze each one of these events, these sabotage events, and there's three different kinds of them. There's overt, covert, and clandestine. So overt is they immediately claim, we did this, and we're doing payback or whatever. And then the covert is where they don't actually say, like they're kind of not going to overtly say they did it. And then clandestine is where you don't even know it's happened. Is, for example, like you build a building with faulty materials, knowing that it's going to only last 5 years. And so only until it collapses, then you realize, oh my goodness, look at these building materials. They were sabotaged, right? So there's actually all three going on. And we're seeing for most of these events we've seen in the last month or so, no one's claiming. So these are covert. These are covert things. And the fact that you're having so many covert things happening across the world, not just one locale, suggests that lends credence to the idea that it is a coordinated thing, such that the very highest levels, I mean, Catherine Austin Fitts and many other really reputable analysts are saying, look, the world leaders that we have all are, basically actors in the sense that they're reporting to people higher up that don't even have public faces. And if we consider, of course, how the world money supply works, that's, pretty evident that there's very, very wealthy people that can pull a lot of strings. So
Yes.
if they're trying, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I personally believe that. I've written extensively on that.
Yes.
It's a recurring theme. It's like, this is an elaborate performative charade to provide the peasantry with the illusion of participatory governance.
Yes.
It's quite frankly the bread and circuses of modernity. And
Yes.
you really realize it. Like, I was watching the King's speech yesterday, and then I watched all of the people being so excited about this King's speech. And when you listen to it and listen for substance, he made some historical references. He was charming. He made a few jokes, and then he brought out the Malthusian climate change propaganda was interspersed. And then it was World War III. We have to protect our allies and stuff. It's like, so the dude, they wheel out this old king, and he makes a case for like impoverishing the West and having another world war essentially to defend their banking hegemon, is how I see it.
Yes, absolutely. There's no question that the royal family is in bed with the City of London and the banking syndicate. And for that matter, getting back to your earlier, well, okay, let's stay on this. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things that one could criticize about what's going on with England, for example, with the royalties, approval. I mean, this place has become a devastated place. I mean, there's 14,000 arrests per year for mean tweets and Facebook posts, and 5,000 currently in jail. Meanwhile, they have DEI bail regulations and laws, and just like Canada has. So much more serious criminals are, for example, raping women or children, or assault, violent assault, even murder, are not getting harsh penalties at all. They're getting out on bail like the next day. But if you do a post that criticizes a government ideology that they say is identifying a particular, group. For example, if you criticized experimental mRNA, injections, which are not even matching the criteria of being a vaccine, they're gene therapies, then they're saying that's anti-vaccine. Which means you're discriminating against the vaccinated, which you're not. And so what I'm saying is that these are they're criminalizing free speech and calling it hate speech, when it's essentially all you're doing is you're criticizing something that the government is proposing, which is harmful, and here's all the evidence from all the scientists, right? So yeah, I mean, we're getting into a level of totalitarianism. It's first evident mostly for Canadians to see in the UK, which is now coming here with all these bills, right?
Yeah, I think
etc.
It reminds me of a Solzhenitsyn quote where it was, you will know a communist society when they criminalize the political opponents and they let the criminals walk the streets.
Yes.
And it's also, you're describing something I've read about called anarcho-tyranny.
Yes.
Where there are criminals in the streets. So that's putting more of an emphasis on like your Joe Average, the guy with a family in a suburban neighborhood. Crime is rampant, and he's concerned about that, right? So it's again setting up the climate for a problem reaction solution, right? And anarcho-tyranny is frequently utilized, along with a lot of other tactics, strategy of tensions. You're seeing all of this stuff fomented, but when I'm watching this, just to bring it back to what we were talking about, I can't help but think I'm watching something that was written, almost like a
Yeah.
script, like there, and that's
Yes.
how I see it. And most people can't see that, and they're just like, no, like they'll dismiss you when you try to say, like, let's just step back, let's try to get out of this bias outgroup framing of right and left. I consider
Yes.
that like a slave dialectic, and it's one of the biggest
Yes.
hindrances for people seeing what's important right now, because we're played off against one another in that framing. But people will just dismiss you, right? They're so tribalistic. I think it's like they've been doing this for a long time. We're multi generations deep into social engineering, what Yuri
Yes.
Bezmenov would have called ideological subversion,
That's
and
right.
like, and people are seemingly blind to this now. So what could we do to even educate them, to even to make them humble enough to consider some of these concepts?
Well, it's obviously it's reaching them with the millions of viewers of these important podcasts we're doing. Uh, I mean that if we look at the situation with the media, right? I mean, how did we get here? Certainly, it's been ideological subversion, but in specifically the media, right? There's four pillars to democracy. One of them is independent media, and since 2018, when the Trudeau regime started putting $500 million into funding not just newspaper staff and columnists, but radio stations, mainstream television networks like CTV and Global, and of course 1.3 or 4 billion per year for the CBC. So when people are getting false information that's only reinforcing the government's propaganda, you essentially have like Pravda in the Soviet Union, right? People are completely misinformed. And so they believe falsehoods. And so this is the biggest thing, as you say, the people that have just consuming mainstream media, it's almost, they're so far ideologically subverted that it's really hard to actually get them to look at new information. So I don't have an easy answer. I do know that it's absolutely critical that we do continue to raise consciousness. And on the positive side, to the extent that X is allowed in Canada, Twitter, formerly called Twitter, X, it of all the social media platforms, it is certainly the most, got the most amount of freedom to share information. And so we are getting information out there. So encouraging people to, they're being told by the government, oh, X is a terrible thing and it's all full of misinformation. They need to understand, look, if you don't have independent media sources, which there's tons of them on X, and excellent independent analysts, and even something that crosses over to a mainstream format that people will be more comfortable watching, like Redacted, Clayton and Natalie Morris, which are excellent journalists, and they have a whole, looks like just like Fox again, except without all the graphics, but it's very professional. And they can see this. This is what I've done to introduce people that I know are not awake and aware, is I point them off to Redacted, and then I get them onto Vigilant Fox, who does excellent summaries of what's going on. And then for phase 3 is introduce them to Catherine Austin Fitz and maybe Whitney Webb and then of course there's a whole plethora of excellent Canadian podcasts like yourselves and philosopher Stoic and Teddy Bear, the PST one, and plus there's the Two Chicks in Politics. There's the True North people. There's like the people out in the Alberta area. There's just a lot of good independent media, of course, Rebel News. So if we can get people to start getting their information not from television news anymore, then we could have a hope of getting them conscious. But I think what's going to happen quickly, as we've been alluding to, is that we're going to see massive shortages in terms of the prices are going to go way up on fuel and on food. And that's going to pinch people so hard that they're going to wake up and go, oh my gosh, this is something serious is going on. And I think that's going to be the biggest wake up call for people.
That's the catalyst. It's modus operandi for all authoritarian regimes. When you read about the ones from the 20th century, the Bolsheviks, the Mao's Cultural Revolution, it's always going after the farmers. So that's the farmers are like the canary in the coal mine for authoritarianism. And it's occurring. Now, I hate to be a black pill. I agree with you. It's crucial that shows such as this one and many others continue to endeavor to inform and educate people on what's occurring. But just to put it in perspective, like I started this show and PTSD PST, sorry, PTSD is what I have. Um,
Me too.
PSD, and so initially these shows hit hard. Like we have big X followings, Chris especially. For PST, we were getting on average about 1,500 to 2,000 live viewers. We were getting 10,000 views per episode. That happened for about, say, 10 episodes. The growth was always up. You could see it climbing. And we peaked at 3,000 live viewers. Now, that's considerable in Canadian politics
That is.
podcast. And then the very next one after our peak, it was done. They just shut us off, man. They literally shut our reach off. I don't know how they're doing it. It's not organic. Now we have about 200 live viewers, maybe 300. Right now on this show, I used to get 500 live viewers just by myself. I'd get 2,000 views per episode. So I started going for bigger guests, and I'd have these bigger guests on, like Bathsheba Vandenberg, the lawyer that represented Helen Gruss. And I was looking forward to exposing some of my audience to this individual, and like, I'm suppressed now. It's like that game is over. Like, I don't know how they did it, but they're monitoring what gets through in these algorithms and the content that fuels the dialectic. If you're culture war grifting, if you're standing in front of something pointing up at a camera, I mean, that stuff is gold, right? Because that foments the other side. That perpetuates the whole division op. That's what it is. And like, I see social media increasingly as a sophisticated algorithmic propaganda tool where the user themselves becomes the propaganda and are weaponized. It's like the future of propaganda where it's interactive. I still think it's crucial to continue, but like, it's increasingly frustrating relative to the suppression.
Correct. I understand. I mean, to a lesser extent, it affected me because I never had the reach that you guys did, because I was basically focusing on the bills, C293 committee, and then Stop C9 committee. And we were basically hammered from the get-go. So I've never had a large viewership. But I can see that being very frustrating. One of the ways to look at it is, in history, those who are telling the truth are always treated poorly. As things start to go totalitarian, and so you're over the target, as they said in World War II, and so therefore you're going to, it's almost like a badge of honor that they're keeping your viewers down. And by the way, mechanically, how this is happening is there are actually Python scripts that are written that some people have got into X, and there are certain topics that if you breach these topics, like you're pushing the remigration, for example, or you're pushing concern about Islam in terms of like the 800 prayer mats thrown down in major intersections in Toronto. By the way, just on that one briefly, the government of Canada is okay with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is considered a terrorist organization, and not just the United States, but many parts of the world. So they are actually fomenting division. They want us, as going back to your earlier point, they want us divided because the left, the right, and then they're doing many different ways, right? On this whole gender thing, on this whole vaccine thing, on the age demographics. Oh, it's the boomers' fault that are, and they're constantly trying to do this because they don't want us to really look at what the real problem is, which is, our politicians at the highest level are basically puppets for another level above them, which are interested in reducing the world's population and in basically enslaving the rest through an AI control apparatus, or control grid, as Catherine Austin Fitz calls it. And so they want us divided all the time. And therefore, you're going to see on X, to the extent that, the whole idea of the town square thing, it's really like they can kind of make it so you still can speak, but there's only 2 or 3 people that around you. Everyone else can't hear you, right? So it's we're unfortunately having to deal with that. But
I was
go ahead.
I was on here after Elon purchased it. I wasn't on X or social media whatsoever prior to that. So when I first came on, this thing was wide open. That's how I was able to garner an audience. I can write fairly decently, and I would make these poignant posts or responses, and I started to accumulate followers. But it was just like a switch being turned off. This was so inorganic. There's nothing subtle about it, and it happened last March. and it coincided with two things like for relevant to Canadians. One was our federal election. Once
Mhm,
that kicked in March, that was like we were deboosted.
mhm.
And then it seemed to coincide with Elon Musk getting shooed away from the Trump administration,
Yeah.
which we all seem like. I don't look at this thing and think that Elon Musk, being the richest person in the world, gets to do what he wants. There's a network at that level, and you have to get along with them. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
constant negotiations, and Elon was told, like, you got to cool it. If you let the peasants have a free form for discourse, they're going to realize what's going on. And
Mhm.
I think in no uncertain terms, he was told you got to cool it, and he had to hire different people to guard the algorithm. Now we're kept in echo chambers. We're still able to talk. We have about 75 people watching presently. But I
Mhm.
mean, there's no growth. Like they stagnated that. They shut that off. And then I think, why do they do that? Well, because they give us just enough to keep us doing it. If we're not on here and we're all meeting secretly, they don't want that. They want us on here talking wide open, right?
Yeah, good point. That brings up a point that one of the things I've seen, I've known in the freedom community is that whenever they find something on somebody, like for example, it's kind of black and white thinking. Everyone's going to have something. Like for example, Elon has done some really good things. For
Mhm.
example, he has actually one of the few billionaires that's actually telling us that AI is very dangerous. There's real concerns about that. At the same time, he's also saying, the overpopulation is a complete myth. The Earth can easily support 10 times the population we have now. So the people are complex, and even Trump, has some things that he's done which were good. But we got to realize that they're always going to be, um, people are not going to be, all good or all bad. For example, I noticed that Elon in the last 2 weeks has been mentioning universal high income. And when someone who's essentially the wealthiest person in the world is saying universal high income, to the average person, that seems like, oh my goodness, that must be a lot of money. First of all, it's not. But it's enough for you to help you pay your rent and groceries. But the problem with that is that it will come with hooks, and those
Mhm.
hooks will be a healthcare agreement. And basically that means that you have to adhere to your vaccine schedule, which all the vaccines are being switched to mRNA platform, lipid nanoparticle, which we know is a toxic platform. As of 2019, it was not allowed for human use for that reason, because the biodistribution problem, you can't control the dosing, and it changes can actually change your DNA, and that's now been shown. So my point is that UBI is a real trap because it involves digital ID, a healthcare agreement, and then once you've got the digital ID, then they can roll out the CDBC or slash tape stablecoin. That's another thing I should just bring up. People think, oh, stable coins are fine because after all, it's a private issuer and it's not the government. Well, actually, no, it's actually arguably worse than CDBC, because when the government does a CDBC, then there's the constitutional and federal laws that they have to adhere to, that the government specifically has to adhere to. But when a private issuer does it, they're not bound by a lot of these things that the government bound by. And as we saw during COVID, I mean, we had FBI people working at Meta and also at X that were just get a phone call, and they immediately tell the guys, okay, now we got to ban these people. The government wants us to ban these people, and the idea that somehow a stable coin is not going to be under that control is very naive, because the whole point of the stable coin is you have to hold for every $1 stable coin $1 of U.S. Treasury, or in Canada, $1 of Canadian Treasury bonds, such that the government has their hooks right into the issuers, and it's the Bank of Canada that chooses, which again is not a private bank, it's not government, but it chooses who the issuers are. So those issuers are beholden to that central bank. So all those kinds of things that they can do with CDBCs, they essentially can do with stable coins as well. So
Yes, Whitney Webb kind of blew the whistle on the dangers of stable coins, and I've
yeah,
never
she
heard
did.
anyone else say that until she did. And then once she explains it, it's just like, well, of course, the truth just hits different, right? When you hear things framed in a certain context, you're like,
Yes.
well, yeah, that makes sense logically. Um, but yeah, it's a massive problem for sure. It's and again, it's like what I'm looking when I'm looking at all of this, I don't even know where to begin. half the times, and that's seemingly by design too, right? Like we're overwhelmed. Like, is there anything practical or pragmatic that people watching could potentially do to mitigate this, to reverse it? Like, is there any white pill? Like, what should regular people be doing right now?
Well, I mean, the most obvious thing is people should be awake and aware to the fact that they should be preparing. Dr. Chris Martenson says, people that are feeling anxiety about what's happening, the anxiety exists in the gulf between the good information that's out there that you become aware of about what's coming, and then here's your level of preparedness, which is way down here. You're not doing anything. In between those 2 points is where the anxiety is. And so as you start to actually get the good information, you know what you need, you know what's coming, and then you start to take the steps. For example, buying storable food, a lot of it, take whatever discretionary income you have and start investing in storable food. That's the things that are typically dehydrated, like rice and beans, for example. But you can't combine those, you have an excellent complementary protein. You also connect with your local farmers, which you can meet at your farmers market, so that you have a direct relationship. If we suddenly see the store shelves are starting to be empty of certain things, you can buy directly from a farmer, and grow a garden. If you've got a piece of property, do start planting food immediately, and try and be prepared for what's coming. And again, I strongly recommend Dr. Chris Martenson, who his handle on X is Chris Martenson, but you just go to peakprosperity.com. And I like him because he's so mainstream. Like he's a PhD in pathology, who then went on, got an MBA and worked in finance. And then for the last 20 years, he's been studying the energy and studying food and studying what's coming with this financial reset thing. He could see all this happening. He's coaching people on how to prepare. And I think that's a very wise thing. And then, of course, that's the number one thing. People should be, for their family's sake, starting to prepare for shortages of things and prices going way up.
Yeah, I think that's sound advice. I'm seeing a lot in my algorithm on YouTube, a lot of the depression era food storage things. People like condensing soup cubes into little blocks, and they're good for so many years, and it's a source of protein. Like there's a lot of forgotten knowledge that occurred through the depression relative to food storage and preservations, various recipes for scarcity. I think that's very relevant too. But I think that's about it, man, honestly, that you could tell people to do, and to try to endeavor to inform each other, like challenge people. Like the cognitive dissonance you get when you start to approach some of these topics with people, like we all know there's levels to it. It's like you were saying yourself, when you're trying to wake people up, you'll give them phase one. Right? Go watch Redact it. Like this is not going to offend your sensibilities too much, right? And then it's a gradual process to get them to finally see, oh my God, like so beyond that, I don't know that there's much we can do. At this point of the show, I do want to reach out to the 80 people watching. If you guys could share this, even more than that, I'll ask you sincerely, like it would help immensely if you guys could send this to people you think might enjoy this type of content. The algorithms are just killing me, so the only reach I get is organic. I'm sure the 80 people that are watching are people that regularly follow and they've clicked the notification bell. I will also ask everyone right now to go over and follow Matthew. You could see his handle is right underneath him. So definitely do that. And at that point, I want to go to one comment here.
Yes.
This is a regular viewer. I see crap daily. It says shortage is a control mechanism, not an unintended consequence. Nothing lets a government turn on each other like lack of resources. I think that's fairly relevant. What are your thoughts regarding that?
Absolutely. And there is nothing organic about the shortages coming. I mean, there's no question that Iran was not a threat to the United States, and yet the United States went in with Israel and attacked it, knowing full well that they have very, very a good asymmetrical sort of response. They've been working on it for 20 years, ever since Iraq was invaded. They knew that they were going to start hitting oil infrastructure. And actually, this brings up a little thing I wanted to tell you, that You know how the Carney government has been how he got elected was saying, "Oh, it's Orange Man bad. That's the problem with Canada, with our facing with our economies." Basically, a complete diversion from the truth, which is the last 10 years of liberal rule under Trudeau have devastated the economy. I mean, we used to be one on one almost with the per capita GDP compared to the United States. Now they're like 22% higher. Well, that's old now. It's coming up to closer to 30% better. They're wealthier, way wealthier than we are, like a third now. But to detract from that, they say it's Orange Man bad. It's all Trump. It's, and then it's his, and then so then the way that Carney behaved with Trump, the Trump administration, he did everything that would exacerbate more tariffs, such as immediately jumping on a plane, even before he was prime minister, and going to Europe to start talking to them about defense and security arrangements and preferential trade agreements. And then once he became prime minister, he did the same thing and continued that, knowing full and then announcing that, it's time that we not rely on the United States for defense anymore. Things which will guaranteed to cause this retaliatory tariffs, which will, quickly destroy the middle class, which is what they're obviously trying to do. Because we know that if you make the middle class not able to be, afford housing and food, they're going to basically have to accept government handouts, and then they get control, right? So it's engineered. And we see a complete analogy with this Iran thing, where they keep attacking Iran, and then Iran devastates the Gulf refineries. All in different Gulf states from Saudi Arabia and the UAE and whatever. They're hitting the refineries, they're hitting the oil terminals, they're hitting the infrastructure, pipelines. And then they go, oh, see, Iran's destroying the everything. That's the problem, and then let's attack Iran again. And again, they tell right up front, if you attack our power plants, this is what we're going to do. And then, so they attack the power plants. And then they say, oh, we got a truce with them. And then within hours of the truce, they violate it. The Americans or the Israelis violate it. And then, of course, Iran launches more. And so they always can point to Iran. See, that's who's destroying the oil infrastructure and, closing it straight. No, that's a complete, turning upside down. And that's the same thing Carney and liberals have been doing, blaming Trump for the economic situation in Canada. And so you get the other guy to do the damage on your side so that you look innocent, and then you can point to the other guy as the problem. And, it seems to be like a real playbook for these globalists.
Yeah, I've been watching the dynamic with Israel and Iran. Like, Israel has its own aspirations in this war. The Greater Israel Project is what a lot of people are implying or insinuating. It seems abundantly clear that they have something in mind, because they're attacking southern Lebanon, and it's the same strategy we've seen in Gaza. They're going back and they're blowing up all of the buildings. They're just making rubble. So it's like they're clearing out an area, a geographical area, and that just seems abundantly clear. But every time there's a peace negotiation made, Israel is seemingly the catalyst to sabotage it. And again, I think a lot of this is by design on their behalf. I'm kind of with you on that. I don't believe things are organically occurring. I think there's a broader plan, and they have to play it out in order for it to be effective.
Well, that pattern you're talking about absolutely fits with what we've seen in the United States. The Lahaina fires, where they wanted to build a 15-minute city that was at North Carolina, where there was the lithium deposit. All of a sudden, they got this torrential downpour that washed everyone off the mountain, and then now they're opening up this big mine there. Then so you got Hawaii, you got California, you got North Carolina and Texas. They're engineering destruction where they want to build data centers, for example. I mean, we haven't gotten into that. We're basically paying for our own enslavement, and not by choice, but because our governments have decided that we need to open up data centers all over the place, which require rerouting of drinking water. And they passed the laws. I mean, here in Canada, for example, in Alberta and other places where they now have the right to reroute the water supplies however they want. And of course, they're rerouting them from populations to giant data centers. What do we need giant data centers for? Well, that's for the control grid, right? That's where we're going to have all the AI and all of the sensors from the, from the AI recognition cameras that are on the streetlights and all around basically the control grid, and the 5G as well, right? Which is going to be able to, be used as a directed energy weapon, and also to surveil. You can do things with particularly 6G, where you can actually get biometrics off of people, their heart rate, everything, blood pressure. So anyway, there's definitely a plan that's being rolled out, and it's undeniable. And yeah.
I think one of the bigger things too is there's never been an era where information dissemination was more intentionally convoluted. Like I was saying earlier, the fog of war, but there's propaganda being waged, and you see a lot of these so-called analysts that are very they have this very specific view, and it's Trump's playing 5D chess and he's up against the city of London. And that's they even like once the Iran conflict came in, that was incongruous with their analysis up to this point. They just worked it into the script. And I'm referencing particularly like people like the Promethean Action.
Promethean Action, yes, exactly. And I totally identify with that. My initial things were, my goodness, the way they're presenting themselves, and the way they're going back to the 1970s when it had some real touch points to make it seem very credible, but everything was all of a sudden coming down to this one thing. And unfortunately, that's usually the sign that there's a psychological operation going on here. And that's not to say there may be some merit, but involved that the city of London and is at odds with America. I can believe that, but the idea that everything is to that, and somehow justifying, like, the going after Venezuela, and now, of course, the Iran war thing, and now at the same time embargoing, Cuba from even having energy, and having blackouts. It's very aggressive action. I mean, to the point of violating international, for example, the interdicting of these ships that are legitimately doing trade. That are moving oil from Iran to China. That is a very dangerous escalation too, right? If you start boarding illegally, it's violating international law and interdicting these ships. You're escalating now to a world war with superpowers, and so we have the risk of the nuclear thing happening, as you know. Yeah, but it's enough information that it's bad enough as it is, but when they throw in all of these angles that are propaganda to confuse people, it makes it worse. And of course, we're seeing that at actually the level of bots on X, which are going in and throwing in all kinds of misinformation or attacking true voices. They're telling the truth, right? And you're right. For your average citizen looking at the material, it's very difficult to navigate and try and find what's truth. And that's where things like the PSD broadcast and your wise, the dumber the wise, whatever
dumb the wiser.
Yeah, dumb the wiser. Thank you. These are really important, because we can identify people that are telling truth, and they can identify other sources of truth, and then you start to develop good, useful information. Go ahead.
So one of the things that indicates that, in my estimation, is people being a little humble approaching it. There's a lot of analysts that they have this certitude, and certitude in this climate with the information, I think it's indicative of ignorance. You're being ignorant, or you're being disingenuous if you have that level of certitude. Be a little humble. Approach this, and when you're learning new things and you're starting to work that into your framing, then you have to ask yourself directly, like, okay, what else am I not seeing? It's not, okay, I have it all figured out and I'm done. It's like these rabbit holes are seemingly endless, especially when it gets to these power networks. Carol Quigley, who's famously wrote Tragedy and Hope, regarding the Anglo-American establishment, what would be the City of London essentially. And what makes Quigley interesting is he admired them. He wrote this in the 60s. He had a lot of access. So he wrote Tragedy and Hope is like 1,200 pages, but there's been a lot of summations of this work. One being Tragedy and Hope 101 by Joseph Plummer. Just to throw that out to the audience, like if you really want to start to make sense of the complexity of the power networks, that's a really good starting point. Um, what about you, Matthew? Do you have any specific books that you think might help someone who's trying to figure this out get a better grasp on it?
Um, no, I can't point to others like Chris Martenson and stuff have a few books already on in this area, which I highly recommend him, and of course Catherine Austin Fitz's work, and Whitney Webb, and there's a lot of people putting out really good material, including books. I I would just add that I think it's important that it's a time since 2020 when this whole operation started. I mean, the last major, you know, one anyway. I mean, sure, there was stuff going on before that, which was all wrong. But is that it's important to stay mentally healthy and spiritually healthy, and congregating with other people. It really helps that are like-minded, and joining groups, and also reaching for your faith, whatever that is, and starting to because these are very difficult times, and any time spent praying, or things like this really, or meditation, they're things that can really help us heal and get through the intensity of the challenges, and because it causes a lot of anxiety and fear. And I think that it's very easy, particularly people in our audience group here who are awake and aware. They're getting a lot of information that I mean, even as gatherers of it, we find it's kind of overwhelming. So you have to have a way of staying healthy, and that's going to mean getting out in nature as much as possible, and like I say, having a lot of human contact with like-minded people, and including on the spiritual or religious side, and having a faith, because at these times this really helps us.
I think that's absolutely true. I think the moral relativism that we see in secular modernity is one of
Hmm.
the biggest. This is what keeps people blind to the
Hmm.
evil all around them, to the evil that could be within them.
Hmm.
You require that logos. I mean, I'm Christian. I believe you're Christian as
Yes.
well. So I mean, it's very important. That's what really started to make, like, when I came back, I was a lapsed Catholic. Now, when I came back to the church, it was because of what I was reading. It wasn't like a spiritual thing. It's like, well, this just makes sense logically. When you understand that things require an ontological foundation for them to be grounded, like you require that logos, and you realize the detriment of moral relativism. Like the
Yes.
more morally relativistic humanity is, like then we can rationalize atrocities. You
Yes, like
start to
Maid.
treat
Yeah.
people mathematically. Maid is a perfect example.
Yeah.
So I think that's sound advice for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the liberal democracy, and what's happened in schools. I mean, when I was going to grade 1 and grade 2 and grade 3, we would say the Lord's Prayer in public
Mhm.
school, and then we would say sing "O Canada," or actually the order was then "God Save the Queen" and then "O Canada," I think. And so when you've got that connection to a religion, and you actually have faith in God, and and there's the Ten Commandments, and there are things in other religions that are similar guides to moral and ethical behavior. It's really makes for a much better life, and much better behavior by people. But what's happened in schools, of course, is that they've gotten rid of it, everything to do with that, and it's all this relativism, moral relativism, and it's just frightening what's doing to children, and younger generations particularly. It's really brutal for them. So yeah, I think there's no question that reaching out to having faith is really important to be healthy.
Yes, it was during my generation. Now, when I entered the Nova Scotia school system, the curriculum we had religion, so that was one of our subjects. And now some of the kids wouldn't be. This was predominantly Catholic area in Nova Scotia, so a
Hmm.
lot of the kids that weren't Catholic, they would go to a different class. They were called alternates, and then a lot of the kids would stay, and we would learn catechism and things of that aspect. We used to start the morning with the Lord's Prayer, and we would
Hmm.
sing "O Canada" exactly the same. By the time I was 9 or 10, they were taking it out. and then it was right
Yeah.
across. By the time I was 12, it was gone. And that it was just full steam ahead without any morality even touched upon, right? And again, it leaves kids radically blind to what this world is, in my estimation.
Yeah. I was just thinking that twigged off Yuri Bezmenov that you mentioned earlier. I'm going to grab one of my tweets after this show and add it to where you post this,
Sure.
because I think Yuri Bezmenov's little lecture there, it's about 45 minutes on the subversion and how it is the classic playbook to take a society and destroy it. It covers all of these topics, and he's ex KGB, and he's just telling you the truth, what he went through as a KGB agent, how they did subversion. And they think, oh, it's all 007 spy stuff. No, actually, 85% of the budget is spent on, subversion and through information
Mhm.
and some spying, but really it's infecting institutions with ideologies, not unlike what's happened with the New World Order, infecting people with these Malthusian belief systems and this UN, the idea that man-made CO2 causes climate change, which is, there's about as much support for that as there was with Professor Ian Ferguson's modeling in 2020 that said that you had 3.4% chance of dying if you got this COVID virus, which was off by 1,000-fold.
Mhm.
And it's a similar thing with the CO2 thing. That's absolutely no support beyond their computer modeling, right? Which is completely malleable and it's not evidence. And so, yeah. Yeah.
There was an American philosopher, William Hepburn, and I think this idea is far older, but he gets credit when I tried to research it. And it's like what they say of Western modernity or secular modernity. It's like we were our cultures, the West used to be referred to as Christendom. It was
Yes.
it was inextricable from the culture, was the religion, and the religion is the soil that sustains us. We had a beautiful, robust, and prosperous societies relative to that soil of Christianity. So when we remove the flower from the soil, when we cut the flower, I mean, there's a residual aspect where the flower's still beautiful for a few weeks.
Mhm.
But I mean, then inevitably it starts to wither and die. And that's the stage I feel we're at with this moral relativism and this
Yes.
secularism. I think we have to realize even if you don't want to realize the truth, you got to realize the necessity of having an ontological foundation for
Mhm.
morality in a society. And you can't beat Christianity for that. But with
Yes.
that said, we're coming to the end. I'm going to give you a chance to give your final thoughts. I just want to give some shout outs to the viewers here. We have Squirrel Nuts, who is a loyal viewer. He reposted. We have Prairie. She's a loyal viewer. Hey, JP, shout out to Prairie. And we have a comment here from Zero Fox. Canada could give lessons in paying our own marginalization on multiple fronts. I think
Mhm.
that's accurate.
Yep.
And they use our own tax dollars to hurt us, essentially.
Yeah, we're the largest contributor per capita to the Ukraine war, by the way.
Yes, yeah, $25.5 billion.
Yeah, well,
That's
if you include the weapons and everything, it's well over 30 billion now. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
That's so hard to believe. Canadians are suffering to the extent we are. The
Yep.
economy's destroyed, and that's the priorities. But with that said, Matthew, where we're towards the end, why don't you tell everyone where to find you and give your parting thoughts?
Sure. Of course, my handle there is Matthew Pauly 13, and also the stop C293 COMTEE account, and that's been sort of not much interviews on that for about 2 months now, because I did a flurry of work on C9 and did an 8-part series in November and December, and so that looks like I just think people need to focus too on these actual bills that are going through, and they need to call or write their members of parliament. It's very easy to do. You can just go to the government parliament website and you look up MPs by your postal code, and you find out the MP and the contact information. Give them a call and tell them what you think about these bills. One by one. There's lots of information here on X. I've certainly, if you just search for C9 or C2 or anything on my account, you're going to find a lot. And so people need to act locally, you know, and actually complain about these bills, because that's ultimately people's silence is kind of like implied consent, and they're basically just railroading over the whole parliamentary process now. With the takeover, the new policy they just passed, they're basically making it so the parliamentary committees, which are critical on second reading, both in the House and the Senate, which normally do detailed debates and they get experts, subject matter experts to come and comment, that's all being taken over by the Liberal government now. So they'll have total control of those committees, and they're turning out the lights. They're literally turning off the microphones and cameras now. And it's really important that people speak up. So it's one thing I'd just like to add.
I agree that that was well expressed. So with that said, I want to appeal one more time. I get most of my views after the live broadcast, so it's still very crucial and important. If you guys could share this stream, it helps immensely. So with that said, I want to thank you, Matthew, for coming out to speak with us, and I want to thank the audience for interacting and watching. And I'll see you next time. My name's JP Berg, and this was Dumb the Wiser. Cheers.
Thank you, Jean Paul.
My pleasure.